But I just wanted for a second to pick up on what Matt said about breast cancer. I think that stall and that NGO is well worth supporting. I'm a breast cancer, I don't like the word survivor, but I did have breast cancer myself 10 years ago, so that's great. I'm theoretically back to normal risk levels. But breast cancer is not a death threat at all. If you get it in stage 1, it's virtually 100% survival rate if you have normal access to Western world medicines, for want of a better way of putting it. But in Africa, the people don't know how to check themselves, and there isn't access. So the survival rate is a totally different thing. And that's what those people are doing, is helping the African poorer communities, rural communities, get to breast cancer not being a death threat, 100% survival. So please, I say from experience, it's a wonderful cause to support. Please support them. Okay, thank you. So back to the future and trends and innovation. I'm going to give a bit of context around the world and what's happening in the world at the moment, and then get into some of the trends that are impacting on our industry. Oh, let's go in the right way on the slides. VUCA sounds like a swear word, huh? It actually probably is a swear word. I'm sure you've all heard of it. We're living in a volatility, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguous society. Think of just next door, the elections in Kenya, the California wildfires, the hurricanes that wiped out the tourism industry in some Caribbean islands, not to mention the Brexits and the Donald Trumps. In South Africa, we've got state capture. And we have a whole range of things making this just an untried and untested world. There is not a new normal. Since 2007, 2009 economic crisis, we haven't got a new normal in the world. It's a very complex and changing world. So how do we look at how we work and how we do things in that world? If you look at this, on the right-hand side, there are two types of systems that we exist in, whether it's down at the corporate level, at the country level, at an industry level. You're either in a complicated or an obvious system. Obvious was the old systems, where we understood best practice could be relied upon because things were obvious. The constraints in the system were rigid, they made sense, they were linear. Things started to get complicated though, and we have a lot of the complicated systems, and that's been where we've been probably for a couple of decades, where you've got to look for good practice, where you have some rules that apply, some things that you can take from history and predict to the future that make sense, but not everything. But really and truly now, we're probably most of the days sitting in complex, where we're saying best practice, and this is where maybe the consultants and the management consultants, and I'm one of those, go and say, let's go find best practice and you can replicate that and it'll work for you. That doesn't work anymore. You've got to be identifying emergent new practices. You've got to be sensing and responding to changes out there faster than you can realize, because there are not rules that govern what's happening to us anymore. Things are changing rapidly. So you hope to sit in the complex environment and move some of what you do to the complicated environment so it's a little bit more manageable, and you hope to not descend into chaos. And chaos exists. If you're in Syria, if you're in Sudan, if you're in some of the countries in the world, you've been in chaos for quite a long time. So it's just a way of looking at things. And then to say that within that you need different leadership. And we in the hotel industry need to think about how we lead this industry in all its different facets in what is effectively a complex system, the bottom section of that. So the top, where you have certainty, simplification, look at the bottom 2 points. You're susceptible to entrained thinking. You're complacent. The old ways are the way they work. And you miss what is happening because you're reacting too late. At the bottom, you've got large numbers of interacting events. You've got non-linear, irrational and unpredictable things, minor changes with disproportionate consequences. So the dynamic, the whole is greater than the sum, and you have emergent practices. And that's where we talk about disruptors. We know emergent things have been disrupting lots of different elements of lots of different industries. And the last one at the bottom there, hindsight does not lead to foresight. You can't use the past to predict the future anymore. You can't use the previous algorithms and projections and correlations and forecasts to predict the future. So it's a difficult environment to live in. And a lot of us go and say, and we sort of say, okay, we can see it's there. We don't know how to quite deal with it. We'll just stick in the ordinary complex, the ordinary complicated environment or obvious environment, and we ignore the fact that we need to start thinking about complex. We're living in complex. So a quote that I like that sort of encapsulates one of those elements, because there's many more things than just technology, is this fourth industrial revolution statement from the World Economic Forum. We're on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced. How hard-hitting is that? Unlike anything you've experienced. We don't know how it will unfold, but the response must be integrated and comprehensive. And that's for everybody in industries, in countries, in their companies and corporations, integrated and comprehensive. And just to explain what it is, the bottom part, a fusion of technologies that are blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. Every hotel has a physical, digital, and a biological sphere. So you need to think about how the technology is blurring those lines in how you run your hotel, how you interact with your guests and your customers. So I think of that, all of that, two trends I want to just hone on now that are happening. They're starting to happen. One is personalization. That is, your guests want their experience with your brand or your hotel to be personalized to their specific needs. And the experience starts at the beginning of the booking process to after checkout. Now what's happening is we're starting to do some personalization on what I call guest-controlled selection. So we're giving the guests more choice and ability to say, an unusual one is choose the scent in their room, or choose the color of the lighting in their room. So as well as temperature and types of pillows and maybe what drink there is in the minibar. So we're allowing some of the systems are getting to more information from guests and delivering back to them what they're asking for. But real personalization is the second bullet there, where you have the data, you've analyzed the data and you can pre-plan and you know already what they want. You don't have to ask them to select. You say, this is what you had last time, is this what you want again? So we seem to start looking at that, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And then going with personalization, because these trends all interact, you can't separate them, and that's that non-linear world, is connectivity. How you talk and connect to your guests is no longer just via a booking system and via the people who talk to them on checkout. You have to be connecting to them via mobile devices or via technology all the time, from the booking, the entire customer journey. In fact, my next slide gives you the customer journey with a few ideas about personalization all the way along it. So when they're looking, when they're searching, if you've got the right algorithms, you're already presenting to them offers based on their history of staying with you or their recent travel experiences, or what you know when they traveled somewhere else and perhaps didn't stay with you. When they book, I think we miss an opportunity to take information from people. When I book a car hire and when I book airlines, I often give more information than I do when I book a hotel. And it might be the purpose of travel. Because if you take the purpose of travel, maybe you will design the room differently for them. So if the person is traveling for a conference, they might want the room slightly different design to a leisure traveler or a leisure traveler with children. And it just comes to desk space and things like that, or lighting or whatever. But take more information, even just arrival time and checkout time. If you have that information, you can actually schedule your housekeeping better because you know when the people are going to leave and come. One of my big ones is the travel industry should be integrating its approach to knowing their guests. So I think when I'm traveling on an airline and staying in a hotel, the two of you should know about that and the airport. And why should I have to collect my luggage? Because the luggage can have an Internet of Things, a sensor on it. You know I'm coming to that hotel. The airline's already done the security check on the luggage. You guys should pick it up for me and put it in my hotel bedroom. I should never have to stand at a baggage carousel. And there's lots of other ways that the travel chain should, I believe, be synchronizing and using information to make it easier. Take the pain out of the journey. Take the pain out of checking in. Pre-check-in online. Choose your room before you get there. Tailor the room choice so that people pay more for higher floors, closer to lifts, slightly bigger rooms, different views. We've been able to choose airline seats and cinema and theater seats online for ages, but not hotel bedrooms, or not choice of hotel room. Look at the language. Tailor the room so that, why do we have printed directories in rooms anymore? I really don't get that. We should have online directories on tablets which you can choose your language, so you get the language in the directory you want. Because those printed things are always out of date anyhow. And you can specify service level. You might upsell for service levels where people want to service daily. You might say, if you only want serviced every 3 days, I might sell it for slightly cheaper. Lots of things you can do. On arrival, check-in should be a thing of the past. You should be able to walk through. The key might be already on your cell phone. The key might be something to do with your thumbprint. There might be different ways of opening your room, but you shouldn't necessarily have to go to a check-in desk. People might be using facial recognition. The porter will greet you because he's already had the app on your phone has told him you are approaching. He's got a picture of you, he knows who you are, and he can greet you straight away. Lots of little things that shouldn't be a hassle to do. And then during the stay, you can do lots of ways of helping the guests to have content, understanding how they can link into the local community, how they can speak to guests, staff, how they can connect with staff during their stay. So the millennials would love to have a host who's a hotel staff member who just is their sort of go-to person, technology on the cell phone during their stay. They don't have to pick up a telephone. They will do it on WhatsApp, or they'll do it on some equivalent. You create a community of guests and staff. I've got on there as well maintenance requests, another one of my bugbearers. Happened to me here at the Radisson. I couldn't actually get them to understand what I wanted. If I was doing a maintenance request in my language, that they could understand exactly what it was, translated into their language so they knew exactly what I wanted and it got addressed, how much more easier than the current system, where, as it happens often, they came up to my room to do the wrong thing, went back down again, came back up to do the right thing. Anyhow. And then the last thing I want to mention about in the hotels is co-creation of content. It's vitally important. You know, videos and GIFs and photos are the biggest way people share information. Instagram is huge. You need to make your hotel, your food offering, your conference venue photogenic. You need to make it so impactful that people want to take photos of what they're doing at your hotel, what they're eating at your hotel. And so you need to work, I think we all need to work on that. And even we do it as oldies, to a point anyhow. Checkout, I don't see why I have to check out. I get out of an Uber, I don't have to say anything. I don't pay anything, I don't do anything. Why do I have to go down to a hotel, look at a printed copy of something, often not even swizzling it around for me to look at. They print it, and then they print it again, then they put it in an envelope. I'm sure we don't need all that stuff. Then after leaving, you've got to keep track of your guests. You've got to talk to them, ask them to rate you. We do that quite a lot, but I think there's a lot more. Go back to them and say, we noticed that these are your preferences, come and stay with us again, we'll get your service exactly right. Already start telling them that you know them. So it's a loop. It's a constant feedback loop where you're doing connectivity with your guests and personalization with your guest. And it's happening. Some hotel groups are doing this. They tend to be doing it in some hotels with some customers through loyalty groups, so it's not widespread, but it's coming for all of us. Because if you've got it in some hotels, and as the snowball rolls, and as you've got a generation of millennials, this will be what they expect. Some things you just need to think about. To really do this, you've got to get into big data and data analytics. You've got to capture the data. So we don't capture it yet. We don't know in one place on one system that we can interrogate what temperature your room was at, what time you went to bed because you turned the lights off, or what time you checked in, or which wine you had. Because the wine you had is just a sort of item on a guest folio, but we don't store that information in a way we can analyze it. So you've got to store it, capture it, store it, analyze it, and act on it. And so that takes a lot of power and a lot of computing power and a lot of algorithms before you can fully do it. But it's starting to happen. It's going to center around mobile devices, which may or may not be the cell phone into the future. So that's going to include things like hearing and visual things and watches, as well as cell phones. Whatever it is the way that people connect mobily into the internet. We will be talking to them as our hotels. And the Internet of Things is going to be incredibly important. So it does mean we're at an investment conference, we're doing hotel design and development. You're going to have to look at how you adapt the physical estate and the IT systems to deal with it. Then data security, obviously vitally important. You're going to have to trust and ask permission. And you're going to have what I call lots of high-tech and high-touch points. So now in the old system, we said we had touch points with our customers, and we talked about the touch points. Now we have cyber touch points, cyber-enabled physical touch points, and traditional touch points. I see I'm taking way too long, so I'm going to have to speed up a bit, so I apologize for that. Just a couple of quotes about, in the next 10 years, hotels will empower their guests with incredible levels of hyper-personalization through mobile devices, utterly tailored experience. But now I'm going to go on to the really exciting future. That's today, guys, what I've been talking about. The exponential digital and other technologies. And I've got another quote there, but I've obviously spoken too long, so I'm going to hurry through. Robotics and AI. I want you to concentrate on this one. I think this is one that's coming back to us in a big way shortly. We already have robobots, as in small robots that help in some elements of service in hotels. We have some hotels with no staff, only robots. Virtual reality has a lot of opportunities, especially linking to tourism and destination connectivity and destination experiences. 3D printing. They are experimenting with 3D printing of buildings. I'm sure you know about this, or I'm sure. Do you know that Boeing is 3D printing titanium parts for their Boeing aircraft? And they save $2 to $3 million per aircraft by 3D printing titanium parts. If an airline manufacturer can do that, there must be applications in the hotel industries, maintenance, spare parts, and that type of things. I want facial recognition, voice activation. The bedroom will go from buttons and things to touch touch surfaces to voice activation of what happens in the bedroom. You'll just talk to the television, you'll talk to the lamps, you'll talk to the air conditioning. Nano and neurotechnology, just to say self-cleaning materials, that's a thing. So where does that take us with sheets and laundries and towels? And then our robo-flying cars to move my luggage from the airport to the hotel, land on the roof, autonomous drones, hyperloops which move people around much, much faster. Can a robot write a symphony? This is a quote from a World Economic Forum paper. Artificial intelligence is already capable of creating a staggering array of content. It can paint masterpieces, write music, put together a musical, write movies, angsty poems, truly awful stand-up comedy. That's what it's doing already. And some of the paintings that have been done by robotic artificial intelligence have sold for $8,000. Okay, so robots robots don't have to be humanoid, but machines that do things for us are coming. And artificial intelligence linked with it is incredibly powerful. So it's coming to the hotel industry. Let me just give you a couple of examples briefly. And even talking about doing feasibility studies. So I saw a demonstration of an artificial intelligence system. It was asked a question. The question was, should we prohibit the sale of violent video games to children under 16? It went out, it found 20 million texts that it thought had relevant answers to that question. It found 3 million that it thought were analyzing, and it came back and it spoke as if it was a debating champion on the pros and cons of prohibiting video sales to children under 16. So you can probably ask an artificial intelligence system, should I build a 5-star hotel in Kigali? And it'll come back with an answer, so I'll be out of a job. But another example, I've forgotten my other example now, but the robots are going to happen. Artificial intelligence is incredibly powerful, it really is. So this is another statement. Let's get it, it's my second last slide, so I am finishing shortly. If it comes up. Of all the industrial sectors, the potential for automation is highest in the accommodation and food services. 73% of activities performed have the potential for automation. Up to half of the jobs in hotels and restaurants could be automated in the next half a decade. That's from McKinsey in July 2016. So you may choose to have robots doing stuff, you may not, because your guests may not prefer a robot, but some people would prefer a cheaper option where the robot does everything, where you have very few humans, or you add the humans to the system. And I would say you put on top of that an AI system that analyzes all that data. You effectively have a property management system across multiple properties, which is an AI system which manages all your data, tells the robots what to do, or tells the staff what to do. And that's the way of the future. It'll be a totally different structure, totally different use of humans in the hotel industry, and totally different use of technology. And it's going to come, and it's happening. So I'm not going to go through that slide. We'll talk about it afterwards. Just another little, if it comes up, quote. This is a quote from a guy called Stanford Thomas, who is the Sub-Saharan head of Google. If it comes up, are you ready for a world where there's a sensory membrane of ubiquitous real-time federated systems, real-time, federated, developed by lots and lots of different people, seamlessly communicating to, for, with everybody and everything, Internet of Things. And it's a very challenging new world out there. So with that, and I overstepped my time, so I apologize, I'm going to call up Mbwana Alliy, who's going to join me on the stage. He's in, time out, thank you. He's got an amazing CV. He's a Tanzanian, and he lives in Arusha at the moment. He's an aeronautics engineer by training and education. As we sit down. He worked in the UK in aeronautics, eventually went over to the US, where he worked in various industries, but he went to Stanford, and after going to Stanford, he went back to, well, I'm not sure which way around it was. He worked for Microsoft in Seattle for a while, then he worked in Silicon Valley, where he started into venture finance and venture capital. He then was in venture capital in total for about 7 years, but he came back to Africa, and he's now running something called the Savannah Fund, which is based in Kenya, although he lives in Tanzania. And he's been there for about 5 years, looking at different venture capital startups and the like. And I think we could talk for a long time, but Mbwana, just want to give us a bit more about your venture capital business and what sort of things you do there?
Yeah, so it's great to be here. I basically moved to East Africa after spending 19 years in the UK and the US to start a venture capital fund, which is venture capital is an asset class that's designed to focus on high-risk ventures typically almost exclusively technology ventures. So obviously having spent time in Stanford at Silicon Valley, that's why I went there. I was bored of my aerospace job in the UK, which is very dry and regulated. It's important, but I wanted to play with some fun toys, and some of the things we're talking about are all coming out of that part of the world. Obviously Apple, Google, Amazon, they're all there. Yeah. So I went there, and I happened to be in Stanford when Facebook was just around the corner from me, so I have friends who work there, etc. PayPal, folks like Elon Musk.
It must be boring in Africa now.
Oh, no, it's exciting now. So taking all that knowledge and some of the capital of the first fund came from Silicon Valley to try and find similar ventures and exciting innovations coming out of Africa.
Okay. Yeah. And you have tried a couple, both before and within the venture capital framework in the travel and tourism sector. Do you want to tell us about those? What was good? What was the challenges?
Yeah, so I actually have been on both sides of the fence. So I've been an entrepreneur. I tried to start an OTA in the safari sector. So like safari booking engine called Yellow Masai in Arusha, Tanzania. We signed up sort of 300, 400 hotels and tour operators and try and solve the problem of how do you have foreigners, tourists come into Tanzania, book online a safari. It failed. And you learn a lot from your failures. One of the issues was I had an angel investor with Tanzania who was doing a ton of finance these things, which is what led me to Savannah Fund. But I also obviously learned the challenges at the time of being too early. I think it was founded in 2009-10, so the internet was barely penetrating Africa. So there's a saying in Silicon Valley, being early is the same as failing, right? or the same as being wrong. Yeah. I failed because I was too early, but that's the same thing. Yeah. Right? So it's fair.
But it goes to what I was saying about emergent practice. There's got to be somebody who failed to safe experiments, because we don't experiment, we don't try, we don't learn, and somebody's got to grasp it and go for it.
So in our current fund, we have 26 investments, and I'm proud of my 8 write-offs.
8 out of 24, okay, 1/3.
26, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good, because that's 2/3 that are good, yeah. And one thing I would say, if I think about the safari industry, and I'm sorry if anybody's in it, I've worked in it in Kenya and Tanzania, is it's still in the old system. The old way works, and we'll stick in the old way. So things to change is a challenge. So one of the questions in the program was, what's your views on the continent's potential to become a global technology innovator? And where can we lead the way? And I know you've got some ideas on payment systems that could be quite different and radical for our industry and generally. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think if any of you read the article, the promotion of this panel, one of the reasons I was able to raise initial financing to come to Africa and do venture capital is the success of mobile money. So M-Pesa obviously leading the way with Safaricom, but then it's now spread across. I think now we're probably approaching 200 million people in Africa who are going to have access to mobile money, and that's an emerging payment channel in an industry, for example, in travel, where you always had credit cards as the main. Actually, before that, there was even traveler's checks. Do you remember those days?
Yeah.
Traveler's checks were really expensive and very inconvenient. If you forgot your receipt, I think that was you couldn't cash it very well. So I would say that payments industry is one of the critical aspects of travel, obviously, and M-Pesa obviously has broadened the access and shown that you can innovate in Africa. In a new payment model, but in the future, I'm very excited about cryptocurrencies.
Okay, tell us more about that. That sounds exciting.
So I'm sure you've heard of Bitcoin, and every year it goes up and down. But right now we're definitely at a high. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that's the most popular, but there's now other cryptocurrencies. Otherwise known as altcoins, alternative coins. So then Ethereum's a really popular one now. There's Ripple, and these are often beyond just payments and currency, but they often do other things that are kind of very interesting. So one aspect is. I'm
sorry. Every time you move your face, we lose the audio.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one aspect is being able to actually fund startups. So I don't know if you've heard of the term ICO, which is initial coin offering, which is actually disrupting what I'm doing. So even as a venture capitalist,
You're being disrupted.
So you can basically do like an IPO as a startup and raise money through a token sale. So you're selling revenue forward. And there's one company in the hospitality industry that I'm looking at called Lockchain that is trying to disrupt Uber through this model. So Uber and Airbnb.
Okay.
So cutting out the middleman, it promises like direct to hotel owners and operators, commissionless, like 0% fees, and anyone can use, because the advantage of cryptocurrencies is that they're truly borderless. So you don't have to go through a bank or mobile money. You can actually, anyone in the world can hold them.
So these guys who operate hotels or who are building hotels should be thinking about how they can take cryptocurrency for payment and free payment.
Yeah, you already have big companies accepting. I think in the US there's a few retailers who are doing it. Microsoft accepts. I think Booking.com accepts for hotels Bitcoin already.
And where we have an African middle class that is sort of underbanked and don't have credit cards, is this a way that they can start to travel in the budget hotel system where possibly they couldn't or they weren't able because they didn't have a credit card to put a guarantee or pre-allocation?
So even putting aside crypto, which is one aspect, there's an aspect around about extending credit. Because of course we know that Africa has an emerging middle class, but that does not mean that they can afford travel. And so I've seen companies as an investor investing in ways to allow African consumers to pay on a credit scheme or layaway model. So there's one company I know called Waka Now in Nigeria that's allowing you to pay in bits and like over time.
So like lay-by purchasing, or it's a type of credit, but it's a different type of credit purchasing.
And because of big data, as you mentioned in your presentation, you can already read a lot of the behavior before. Like a bank would obviously assess you in a traditional way, but because of the big data, you're seeing financial services companies, or fintech, you probably heard that term, where they can assess your credit very quickly using your Facebook profile, using your phone. There's a startup I know called Tala that reads your SMSs on your phone and determines your creditworthiness. So it actually it has rules or algorithms like if you have more incoming SMSs than outgoing, it means you're more creditworthy. And of course it learns as it goes along. The key with AI is it learns.
No privacy anymore, hey?
No privacy.
No privacy, but lots of incredible information that can be utilized.
In the beginning, this credit scheme may have like a high failure rate, but you train it.
Yeah.
Then over time, it becomes better.
It's AI. It's a learning machine. Yeah.
And the key is you can really broaden the because technology allows access to massively increase. One credit officer can't serve like 1 million people, right? But an AI machine can serve
everybody.
1 billion Africans if we need to.
Yeah. That was one of the things I didn't go around saying in my presentation. These computers are way cleverer than us because they can do much more than us with much more data. So they can do what you need a room full of, 300 experts to do things that one machine will do for you just like that in lots of different fields and arenas. But that stuff about what's on Facebook, what's on your WhatsApp, what's everywhere, people have done psychological profiling of whether you've got depression or not and all sorts of things just by looking at what's in the public domain on you. So I can get creditworthiness. So I think this is a huge opportunity because we're not under cell phoned in Africa to start getting the marketplace, the middle market, to be able to pay and stay in hotels. Yeah.
Of course, the big other area that is now maturing technology but still disruptive is social media itself, right? Yeah. We're seeing how Facebook has influenced elections in the US.
Yeah.
But in the hotel industry, you could actually, on the personalization aspect, how would you find your influencers? Maybe you can, like a lot of these Instagram celebrities who go around taking selfies of themselves in resorts. If you give them a discount and incentivize them as your new marketing channel, you can bring huge amount of
very good idea. Yeah. I think some of the groups are trying that with some high profile personalities, getting them to tweet and go on social media. But let's talk about another area that you've had some experience in and where technology is challenging our industry: distribution, OTAs. Where do you see that going in Africa? Are we going to just be swamped by the global aggregators and integrators?
Yeah. So one of the most difficult aspects of my job, and my investors ask me this constantly, new and older, is when coming to Africa, just copy clone what already works. Yeah. So if Expedia, Booking.com works in the US and Europe and Asia, why not just invest in the equivalent? So in that case, it would be like a Jumia Travel or what I was trying to do. And that obviously is risky in some ways, but also you could be a fast mover in a market where, for example, Rocket Internet out of Germany built a business model around copying what works in the US and bringing it to Africa or Asia or even Europe before the Americans come over here. And that is a publicly listed company in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And they own Jumia.
Which is this?
Effectively, Jumia Travel is effectively Expedia, Booking.com clone.
Yeah.
And
Jumia, for everybody who may not know, it's an African hotel booking system, basically.
Yeah. So I've used it to book in Kenya, in Nigeria. But the issue with that is, change is so fast that you may be copying a model that's already outdated. So, our OTAs right for Africa now, given that they've worked in the rest of the world, and also those OTAs are not standing still because travel is a global business.
Yeah.
It's not like, Uber's time to get to Kenya is not going to be the same time frame as like Booking.com and Expedia to get to Kenya.
Yeah.
Because people travel all over the place, not necessarily use a taxi, in that space. You'll find the big giants get to Africa quicker than the local competitors. So I am not very positive on Africa OTAs.
Okay.
I've looked at a few like hotels.com.ng. Jumia is obviously like a big corporate clone of Expedia, but I think there are new models that could potentially like OTA 2.0 or 3.0,
Do you know what that might be?
They might be more mobile-centric.
Okay.
They might incorporate things like concierge services. So, for example, there are emerging apps where you can, again, using AI, so it's pervasive everywhere. You have a bot, so you can just say, I'm looking for a hotel in Kigali for leisure with access to gorillas in the mountains, and the AI will automatically look at your past history and start to book for you and say, here are your options. And using things like Siri and Amazon Echo and all that, you can interact with it. So you can ask it in your bedroom or in your office, and it tells you, oh yeah, looking that up. Based on your history of how you travel with your family, I can tell you that this is a great hotel, Radisson Blu is perfect. It's done. Your credit card's on file. So personal assistants embedded in OTAs are coming very, very quickly. There's one I tried called Fin. It's a personal system where you pay $30 a month, and it just gives you credit to be able to ask these questions. And they're often initially human trained. So you have both robots and humans. So of course, if it makes a mistake, you're like, oh, actually, I'm going to book you in Radisson, Cape Town. Or did you mean Cape Town, or did you mean
the human that does the intervention at the moment?
Exactly. And so you're having a lot of AI-assisted personal assistants that can potentially be integrated into the OTA model, and those could disrupt the OTAs completely. So I'm looking at those and not necessarily the...
I think that's fantastic. So we're saying OTAs are already old technology, and what's coming new is OTA 2.3 or whatever it is, with embedded AI and embedded content and embedded personalization on your history, basically. Amazing.
And of course, these OTAs could buy these companies, right? So
of course they could,
Hotels Tonight is probably one that's probably going to get bought by one of these. I don't know if you've heard of Hotel Tonight. It's US and Europe, which is an app where you can book very quickly. Because OTAs also provide a challenge for selection. Like, it's the problem of going into a supermarket and seeing too many cereals. You can't decide which one you want.
This is going to pre-select for you because it knows you.
Yeah, it can select it for you, and then it has a concierge built in, a WhatsApp built in, so you can chat to I want a king room, I want to check in early. You can do all that over the phone. So those are like intermediate innovations, but that might get bought by the OTAs. So those disruptive ones as well.
Although if you look, I don't know, one of the questions or one of the ideas is how do hotel groups, how do hotels and small independent hotels, how do they play in these arenas? And one of the ways Accor's done it is go buying some of those startups. And that's one option, to get into bed with partners or to do it. Or the other option is to wait and see or do it incrementally. Got any ideas on that for hoteliers? How do they get this innovation, or how do they look for what to adopt?
So the big hotels, so for example, one opportunity is small hotels who are not necessarily getting maybe a bad deal on the OTAs, or they're not very visible because the OTAs also rank your hotels. So maybe a bigger hotel has a bigger budget because they'll often have marketing schemes built into them. Maybe an OTA can come over and focus just on small hotels or certain geographies, and that could be one way. But I don't know what you're asking about more.
It's more that the big companies and the big hotel groups actually have got programs. They've got innovation programs going. They're looking for things. They're doing partnering. They're doing their own in-house development. The small guys struggle. They need to sort of find a way to play in those fields when they're independent and small.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously, as a more nimble hotel group, you could probably start to adopt the technologies faster already than a bigger group. The bigger hotel groups could start setting up corporate venture arms. That's one idea. Maybe being, again, subservient to what I do, but being an LP in a fund that has a strategy to invest in the hospitality innovation space could be one way to have access. Even if you're not, a lot of corporate investors in my asset category, I invest in funds like mine to get informational rights and technology,
what's coming out,
as well as returns. The primary purpose is not to get returns.
So it's to see what's coming, what's the emergent practices, what they might be able to adopt.
To co-invest or acquire. Right? And so if I talk to a startup who is building maybe a next generation OTA, I might say, hey, in my fund I have a hotel group as an LP. They could take you instantly to 10, 20 countries in Africa because they have this touch point. And in Africa, you see, I think about half of the funding in Africa is corporate venture capitalists, particularly out of South Africa. RMB has a venture arm. I've seen IBM do a lot of the corporate venture stuff. Google is playing a lot in the space. I've seen a lot of, in the banking sector particularly, but there's opportunity for other sectors as well.
So where are the hotspots in Africa for this type of innovation and your VC investments?
So, the Savannah Fund name comes from the term Silicon Savannah, which was often used to describe Nairobi as it emerged about 7-8 years ago. So Nairobi is a huge center driven by M-Pesa and mobile banking, but obviously being a very open country, hopefully that continues to be the case. But Rwanda is also developing. Kigali is becoming more and more important. For example, I met with the CAA during this conference, and they're progressive on drone regulations. So this flying cars thing is not so far away, and even Rwanda might play a leading role there. Tanzania also is doing the same thing. So I think Zipline is already is a drone company that's delivering blood around our hospitals, and that's based out of Kigali. Other areas, Lagos, of course, because Nigeria is such a huge market. So if you want shared consumer access, Nigeria is really, really important. They also have a lot of diaspora talent returning home from the UK, from America, and so a lot of the investments made in Nigeria are smart Nigerians coming back home to build out their country, particularly as their oil dependence is going down. So it's a nice transition where before the oil price was high, they were a bit complacent. They were so focused on their oil economy, but now that that's not the case, they're like looking at other areas. I mean, Andela is an example of that. Yesterday or 2 days ago, $40 million funding was announced for them, which is training Nigerian developers, engineers. That's Zuckerberg invested in that company. And then, of course, Cape Town, which is one of my favorite. That's been, constantly being an innovator. And I think a lot of people initially find it very similar to Silicon Valley because the weather and the lifestyle.
And the wines and the grapes.
Yeah, because you need a place. It can be hard to innovate in a congested city, right? Particularly to attract talent, you need a really nice place for people to come in. You can lure a Silicon Valley engineer to move to Cape Town easier than going to Lagos, for example. We've seen companies out of there, like for example, Zona, which is a payment company that has a headquarters in Cape Town, but operates in Malawi and Zambia. So it's a very good way to access Southern Africa. And of course, the corporate environment is much more mature in South Africa, so you have a lot more players.
So there you get it. Those are the hotspots to go look for the emergent venture capitalists supported companies that might have products for the hotel industry in Africa, in those centers. You touched on drones. I want to touch a little bit on transport. I didn't get to it in my presentation, but there's huge developments in transport. And if you look at all projections of where tourism will go, and hotels absolutely rely on tourism, the access to transport, ease of transport, speed of transport is the biggest driver of increases in travel and tourism. And I think there's radical new technologies in transport coming out. So some thoughts on transport? Any startups in those areas that you look at?
Well, right here in Kigali, obviously there's Zipline. That's more into the hospitality sector. It has to start somewhere. Of course, you want to move things first before you move people.
Okay.
So you're going to see a lot of it. But then in China is leading away a lot on the drone technology. So the number one, the Apple of drones is DJI, which is like the off-the-shelf consumer drone that is being used in a lot of different areas, from logistics to to some delivery, but of course filming and photography. I would say that obviously what Elon Musk is working on at SpaceX could be influential on how you think about using rocket technology to get from point A to point B faster than even Concorde could. Right?
So just to tell everybody, there's a couple of things Elon Musk floated. One thing called a Hyperloop. You've heard of the Hyperloop, but I'm not sure, where you have sort of a vacuum tube situation and you sit in a pod or a bubble and you shoot along the vacuum tube between destinations, faster than planes now, apparently it's going to go. There's a couple of ones in sort of development mode in different places in the world. But he's gone one step further than that now. He's talking about rocket travel. So he's now announced that he's got a system where he'll fly between continents in a few minutes. And you'll actually, he's suggesting, for instance, in London, it would be launched from the Thames River. You take a little boat, just a short ride to the middle of the Thames, sit on a rocket station, get into the rocket and go to, I don't know, Cape Town, go to New York in minutes, in 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
So one of the things where Africa plays a role is being a platform for what people often refer as leapfrog innovation.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, if Elon Musk went to London and proposed that, you might have just like Uber's getting the taxi lobby and government, you know, burdening them.
But you could get it in here.
But in Africa, a country might say, hey, we don't want to build these roads in big airports anymore. What if we just, here you go, here's a license to do the tunnel right now.
Yeah, Nairobi, Mombasa, Cape Town, Durban, in Joburg, Durban, there's multiple places.
That's how M-Pesa got started. M-Pesa got started because, Kenya allowed it to happen, whilst in other markets like, say, the West, there's too many banking regulations that interest that block that innovation from scaling quickly. So even in the drone space, like I believe Zipline is using Rwanda as a great place to innovate and leapfrog. That they couldn't do that in the US.
And the other place they try everything is Dubai. So Dubai, I understand, is also experimenting with autonomous flying taxis. I don't know when a flying taxi and a helicopter and a drone and a car, autonomous cars, they're sort of all merging now. But stuff is happening in that space too, which will impact how your guests are shuttled to and from your hotel, how their luggage gets moved around, I'm absolutely sure. We've got 5 more minutes. So if anybody's got any questions for Mbwana, or are you just too dumbfounded? Are you scared? Or is it too early in the morning still? I can't see very well, but if there's no questions, oh, Jonathan's got a question. Down here? Okay.
Great, thanks so much, Mbwana. Just a quick one for you. What investments have been successful that you've invested in? in your fund? What are you focused on in terms of, and secondly, how do you look after those investments, those startups that need more attention, but they're not gaining the traction in terms of profitability?
Yeah, so the venture capital model is very, it's hard to allocate your time because the way the model works is that you have a subset of companies that generate the majority of your returns. So unlike traditional private equity where you typically maybe make 5 or 10 investments, roughly equal amount of investments, and you count each one and help each one equally, and they typically all succeed, maybe a few failures, maybe one. In venture capital, you have a majority of them fail or just stagnate, and then typically about 15%, 20% of those succeed and generate the whole fund and plus returns. So you know, this is like
gambling.
Well, yeah, humans are pretty bad at like figuring out like, you know, this as how to like allocate your time.
Yeah.
So
I've even heard there's AI to choose which venture capital one is going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously we monitor all the metrics and see how as the ones that are taking off, you often double down on the fund. So you might have half the fund that you allocate to new investments, then another half for the existing ones that you think are panning out and becoming the winners. And so in our portfolio, it looks like we have a company called Copia Global in Kenya is disrupting the sort of e-commerce chain and providing Alliy model, CS catalog, Argos model to peri-urban Kenyans. Okay. Those who can't afford to go or can't find
into the shops.
A supermarket chain like Nakumatt, they can just buy from a corner store at Duka. And that's growing 20-30% a month.
Wow.
And it's the most valuable company in our portfolio. And it's, you know, it's basically e-commerce disruptor or retail disruptor. And then we also have a company in Nigeria called Supermarket, so doing groceries. But then there's another one as well, which we're following closely because AHIF is a logistics company. So trying to be the next DHL for e-commerce. Okay. And then in South Africa, there's a company called Wise Talk, but it's kind of trying to be the Yammer or the Salesforce chat. For emerging markets, so it's trying to, and particularly helping mining companies or frontline African environment, not necessarily people behind an iPad or a computer, but you know, have a basic phone, etc. So those are some of the companies. I can't talk too much about them,
but those are giving you the returns at the moment.
It's also too early right now, actually, because the fund is 5 years in. Okay. It's a 10-year fund, so you know, if I did this talk again in a year's time, there might be a totally different type of companies that have emerged.
Successful.
Yeah. So it's hard to know.
Anybody else got a question? Can't see any hands. So one last question from me. Any advice in terms of the type of staff you need in the future to work when you're working with autonomous drones and AI systems and robots and mobile-centric apps? Any thoughts on that? The type of staff, the skills, you know, human resources. What do we need to train people to think like and to do?
This is a really important question. Because I hire for the fund as well, like associates or principals. The most important thing is someone's ability to learn and constantly improve themselves. Okay. I take courses almost every other week, online courses. Teaching yourself the latest trends is really, really important. Yeah. So not necessarily hiring for what they know now, but for what degree they have, but the ability to constantly learn. Okay. So I often see resumes or CVs that have online courses as part of their
what they've done,
and that's a really big indicator because
they did it by themselves, self-motivated.
They'll be very current. They'll be like, "Oh, I did this course last week, or last month," and you're like, and then they're doing it constantly, and that's a really because there's just too much to learn, and it's changing too quickly.
So they've got to be learning perpetually, and you're looking for that in their background. Perpetual
so
learning.
That's probably like the most. To stay ahead, you have to be constantly feeding yourself.
Okay, stunning. I'm just going to end with a quote, and then say thank you to Mbwana. But this is from the World Economic Forum as well. They say in the next decade, digitalization in travel and tourism is expected to create up to US $305 billion of value for the industry through increased profitability. The next one's interesting. Transfer $100 billion US of value from traditional players to new competitors and generate benefits for consumers worth about $700 billion US for customers and society. So that's the World Economic Forum's analysis of how this sort of stuff will impact our industry. And listening to Mbwana talk, there's so much I don't know, there's so much all of us don't know, but there's so much potential out there to harness what's happening in the technology and innovation, new business models. He's already being disrupted, he's a venture capitalist, it's amazing. Any last thoughts for our audience?
I mean, in the last few days, I've been talking to a lot of folks in the hospitality space, hotel owners. It's interesting their views on which areas they should focus on. It's just, versus just building a new hotel, you might want to start thinking about how to incorporate new hotel designs as you were mentioning. That's probably the only thing I've noticed from my time.
So the thing is, don't think you're in the old system where where the traditional methods work. Start thinking out of the box about the new world and the new systems and the new hotels and the new consumers.
Yeah, and otherwise consider like getting involved in the startup community. Even being an angel investor. I know, Jonathan, you said you've done some angel investments in the travel space. You know, you don't have to have a fund to do angel investment. You can invest as little as $5,000 in the next potential Expedia or Uber or some drone company no one's heard of today. Right.
Fantastic. $5,000, guys, and you can get a step on the rung. What's it called? Step on the ladder.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If the investment fails, you learn a lot.
Yeah.
So it's an investment in your education.
Yeah, and one last little thought from me. I mean, I think you've got to create innovation thinking teams in your hotel amongst your staff, and you've got to get some of your guests to tell you what would work better for them as well. Ask the consumer and ask the guests. Ask the staff. Thank you very much, Mbwana. I think it's been very, very eye-opening, and I hope the audience has loved it. Thank you very much, everybody.